Hello everybody, welcome. I'm Cam Christo. This is a video about EU5. Some of you asked, here is my answer. I am going to do a video looking at the TInto talks, aka the EU5 dev diaries that have been coming out over the last couple of weeks. Some pretty cool stuff in here, and this is the, I say this, but you can't see what's on my screen. I'm about to show you why I actually decided I would make these videos. Initially, expectations were low. To be honest, I haven't really been very inspired by Paradox's releases lately, but something excited me. It appears that Johan, who is the game director on Project Kaisar, seems to have realized something that has bugged me about Paradox releases recently and for quite a long time, and that makes me extremely hopeful. Now, you know, if you want to maximize joy, maybe you should not get your hopes up. But if you want to maximize joy, maybe you should, I don't know, go for more walks. There's all kinds of things you could do. Anyway, I'm going to get my hopes up. I've been trying not to. I failed because of this. This was a comment from Johan. I'm going to read it to you verbatim, and then I'm going to discuss why it's so important. And then we're going to dive into all of the TInto talks and all of the comments that Johan has made under them. If Imperator taught me one thing, it's that no one remembers the amount of content a game had at launch. They compare it to the state it is in now. EU4, Stellaris, Hoi, etc. all now have insane amounts of content. Our goal is that the amount and variation in this game should be on par with that at release. That is the gauntlet that Johan has thrown down. That is the task he has set himself, and I hope he succeeds, because that would be great. Often have I heard it said, in defense of CK3, especially CK3, also Imperator, mostly CK3 Imperator, and Vicky 3, you know, of course, this game, you can't compare this game with the current state of EU4, or the current state of CK2, because, you know, it's a new game, it only just came out, it's only got poor Paradox can't possibly create as much content as a game that has had years of development time, even though the size of their company and the budgets they have to make these games has increased dramatically since those games came out. You know, you have to accept that you're going to get a somewhat bad product at launch that then gets good. This is combined with another theory, which I hear, which is that EU4 and CK2 and Hoi4, and people have been saying this in the comments of my most recent video, are bad games. They were bad games at launch, and then they became good with DLC. They were boring and bland and flavorless at launch. And this is flatly false. I played Hoi4 for about 1,000 hours in the first 9 months of its release. Don't do the maths on that, it's depressing. I did not get a first-class degree. EU4, I played for many hundred, I don't know the numbers on that one because it was longer ago, but I played for many hundreds of hours before I had any DLC for it. I think I was on the, it probably wasn't 1.0 because I played it just very shortly after release, but very close to release. They were, and same for other games as well. Stellaris was pretty good on release. Not as good as the other two, but pretty good. These were really good games when they release. The other thing that I want to mention is that he's completely right that no one cares. He says no one remembers. Maybe he's being more gentle than I would. I should have really zoomed in on this for you, but it's not that no one remembers the amount of content the game had at launch, although it seems like a lot of you fools don't remember that EU4 was a good game when it launched. It's that they don't care. It's not just that they don't remember. They literally do not care. And why would they care? Why would I care that CK3 is a new game and CK2 is an old game and I had lots more time to develop it? I still have CK2. You're not competing in a battle of ideas to persuade me that your game is of reasonable standard. That's between you and your product managers. All I care about is which game am I going to play today? And I'm going to play the one that's best. I don't care how long ago it came out at all. Like that's not a relevant factor in my decision-making process. Johan appears to have understood that, and that's awesome. People are saying this is completely unrealistic. They can't possibly do this. I think it is realistic. I don't know exactly how many people were working at on EU4 during its whole run of development. I do know that several times that team could have been counted on one hand. Johan has a team of 30 or something. I think I've seen people say 30. I can't cite that number. Don't hate me for not being precise on that one. I could be wrong. He's got a bigger team, right? And what we're talking about here is content, right? And content, to me, is different from mechanics. If you have 5 software developers working on designing something and you give them 15 additional software developers, they do not develop 4 times as fast. They might develop slower. It's very difficult to scale or to design a specific mechanic in parallel with lots of different people. That's challenging. Content, though, not so much. You can have 50 people designing 50 EU4 mission trees at the same time. Yes, there'll need to be some coordination between them. But if you have, and here's just, don't take these numbers as exact, but I submit that if you went from having 10 people writing EU4 mission trees, which this game will not have, by the way, and we'll get to that. But if you had 10 people writing EU4 mission trees and you went to 25 people, I think you could produce twice as many mission trees of the same quality, assuming the people are all also of the same quality. You can scale in relatively linear manner the amount of content you can generate for a game. I can't remember when this was. I think, and I'm just vaguely remembering, don't take this as gospel, but I think at one point EU4 had like 3 people working on it. The amount of content they were able to produce in a year could plausibly be 10 times less than the amount of content that Johan and his team in TInto could produce in a year. And if that's true, then of course they can get the amount of content into the game that's needed to actually have it be a viable, standing on its own merit, not on your charity based on where you hope it's going to be in the future, competitor to other PDS titles. And that's exciting. This is a profitable, growing company. They can afford to give you a game that is good on release. They could afford to do it when they released CK2. So they certainly can afford to do it now. And I think it's great that Johan is taking the bull by the horns and taking this challenge, head on, and committing to trying to do this. That's awesome. Will he do it? I don't know, but I am now cautiously optimistic. So let's take a look at the actual TInto talks. I'm not going to read these verbatim, but we will just take a look. So the TInto talks, this is a really nice visual asset, by the way. I'm gonna use that as a thumbnail. You'll have already seen that. So the TInto talks. Stuff that here that's really interesting. Why are they doing this? Oh, here we go. He did say they have almost 30 people. So they haven't announced what the game is, but it's, in my opinion, it's transparently EU5. They might not call it EU5. Some people have postulated that they won't call it EU5 because that's too Eurocentric and they want it to be a more global game, which is fair enough. I hope they call it EU5 just because that seems like the product marketers will cry if they don't. But we'll see. It is going to be EU5, whatever they call it. Is my submission. Of course, I'm talking from incomplete evidence. I should point out, you should assume this about everyone that ever speaks to you on any topic ever, by the way, but everything I say is my opinion. And if I claim something is true, I mean, I think it is true. Now, if someone tells you the sun rises in the morning, they're also telling you they think that the sun rises in the morning. But some people think that thinks means all kinds of different things. Anyway, just preface everything I said by, I think, because maybe that'll help you. So let's take a look here. They are giving us info earlier than normal, significantly earlier than normal in the development process. And they're doing that because they think it'll be able to give them good feedback and they'll be able to make changes according to what people want. He does not want Imperator to happen again. Where is it? He says this somewhere. Here we go. I think games like Imperator may have looked different if we had involved the community earlier and listened to feedback. For those of you that do not know your history, Johan publicly stated that he almost quit game development after the reception that Imperator got at launch. And I think Johan has made some bad game design decisions over the last, 10 years. I think he's also made some extremely good ones. And I very much respect him for that. And I think that he creates some very good games. And he had a big hand in creating, my favorite games. So I'm very glad that he didn't. And I think this is an extremely... whether they do take on board this feedback, who knows? We wait to see. I think this is an extremely mature way of approaching it. He's recognizing, there was a lot of vitriol against him when Imperator came out that was unfair. There was some of it that was more fair, although I suppose if it's vitriolic, it's almost by definition not fair. But this is an extremely mature way of approaching, I can see, he's saying, in my opinion, I can see how, I can do this differently and improve the situation. Awesome. Good for Johan. Good for us if he does indeed take this feedback on board. So then the real stuff they actually put in here, the first one is not very meaty. By the way, the links to these will be in a pinned comment if you want to read them yourself completely, and I wouldn't blame you. So there's 3 things that he says they want to have. They want to have a believable world, setting immersion, and replayability. So everyone knows what replayability means. Immersion is fine. Everyone knows what this means. Believable world. Now this is a really interesting way of phrasing it. He didn't say historically plausible world. Or, sorry, historically accurate world. And this is something that I think people get wrong about EU4. There's a guy on Twitter, he's in other places, like real life as well, I'm sure. What is his name? You'll know who I mean in the comments, some of you anyway. The historian that's done some really good blog posts on EU4. Anyway, he makes the mistake that a lot of other people make, in my opinion, that they think that EU4 is and other Paradox games are attempting to model history. They're not. They are attempting, largely, in my opinion, to be historically believable. And the reason you want to be believable is because it makes it more interesting. When it feels like history, that's a good thing. But trying to be historical for historical's sake, not interesting, not really useful. If you want to experience a simulation of history, don't touch the keyboard, because there was no one with the position of the player in a realistic portrayal of history. So what I like here is he's understanding it's believable. They should be believable and plausible, avoiding abstraction, not realistic, not information obscurity, for example, because I hate that. But realistically, the guy sitting in his palace in London wasn't going like, I see there are 6,000 people living in West Yorkshire and they're kind of unruly at the moment because of this factor and this factor. But no, plausible and believable, but not necessarily realistic. That's my reading of this, and I like that. And here we go. Yes, faithfulness to the setting. This is good. Giving a special feel, not like locking you into historical outcomes, but being faithful to a setting. That's what makes sense to me. I think that seems cool. So there were some comments from him on this one. Let's take a look at them. I'm not going to read all of these, but we will see. Sorry, I appear to have... Hang on a second. Okay. Sorry, I thought there were more replies on this one, but there weren't. Never mind. Straight on to number 2. So we get the world map, obviously a cropped version of the world map. He had to clarify this for some people. And one of the interesting things you immediately notice is there are sea lanes in this map, which is, it's a choice. We'll see how that plays out. I can't picture whether I'm going to like that or not. It means that you're going to be able to kind of blockade the seas much easier, it seems like. So that's going to be really interesting. But let's look at it here. So they've changed it. They've got a GAL stereographic projection. What this means is that the world is presented onto a flat plane, actually a cylinder if you think about it, when you can scroll infinitely left and right on Paradox games, most Paradox games, maybe all. You scroll on ZK3? Anyway, doesn't matter. So the idea here is that this projection, to a better extent, preserves the size of land masses. What it does worse than the Mercator projection, which you are probably used to, Mercator? I'm not entirely sure how you pronounce that, is it doesn't preserve as well the distances between places, but between land masses, that is. But the distances between land masses isn't preserved in it properly either. And the way that distances are calculated in EU4 is usually based on real distances, not on map distances. So it doesn't really make too much of a difference. Some people are worried about that. I think this map looks good. I think it looks good. I like seeing with chonky Africa. Seems like that'll be fun. Lots of impassable terrain on this map, which is interesting, especially around what will become DRC and Amazon and stuff. Very cool. Interesting to see how that plays out. I like complicated impassable areas. I think it adds fun to me. So they have locations. There are locations within provinces, is how they have described it. So you can see here that Uppsala, Ekoping, and Stockholm are all within a province here, as you can see. So we've got Stockholm, part of the province Uppland, part of the Svealand area, and part of the Scandinavia region, part of the Western Europe subcontinent, the Europe continent. All makes sense. It seems good. If you compare it to EU4, basically what we had in EU4 were on the scale roughly, and this is roughly, of provinces. They've added in locations within them. More provinces, more granularity. Seems good to me, as long as there's a good way to visualize the data. And we'll talk about that a bit more in part 3. I think it's 3. So now this is really interesting to me. They are going with these sea lane things, which I think is going to be, well, it's going to be interesting. It looks pretty janky to me, but maybe with a nicer map view, it'll get used to it. But I don't have too much to say about this, except that I think it's really interesting. And we'll see. We'll have to see how it works out. So they also say there's stuff on this which I think is really interesting. So they have 3 values per location rather than just a. Yeah, Victoria 3 manages this really badly, in my opinion, where there's basically just modifiers as far as I can tell. But we have climate, topography, and vegetation. More granularity on provinces about their geography seems extremely fun to me. It will allow some geographical determinism, fun times to get manifested into the game. Looking forward to that. Now on this one, there are definitely more replies. So let's take a look at some of them. So yeah, just confirming those bits that aren't water tiles are in passable wasteland. I'm not going to read all of these, but here's a really interesting one for you. Those of you that are scared about a repeat of Victoria 3. Project Caesar will have a warfare system that involves moving units in locations on the map, and he later clarifies that this is per province, and you can capture individual provinces. So it will have to some extent, closer to EU4 than Victoria 3. We can't say how close to EU4 at this stage, but close to EU4 than Victoria 3, which I personally am happy about. Yeah, absolutely not Victoria 3 style combat. I don't remember. Let me just check if there's anything else I want to highlight here. I thought this was an interesting one. How we solve Border is something you will learn about late in Q2 if my schedule does not change. Johan, communication efficiency is such a good mechanic. If you haven't played Mayo and Taxes, your ability to govern an area is based on your ability to communicate with that area, which encourages you to conquer along geographical borders that make sense. It's difficult to send a message over a mountain range, things like that. It really helps Border, and it makes the game so much more believable and immersive. That would be very cool. But we'll see, like Q2, as long as the schedule doesn't change. We'll see. I will, by the way, be creating one of these videos summarizing groups of these TInto talks every so often. At least that's my plan. Maybe I won't stick to it, but that's my plan. Was there anything else? Yeah, so still real time. So yeah, it's EU4, it's EU5. It's got the stuff that you'd expect for EU5. And yes, individual locations can be independent. So it's not that you can do some things on the province level, but then in actual like conquests and so on have to be at the province level. You can have individual locations, which is cool. On to TInto Talks number 3. So maps, and this is the map that got people first speculating about start date. I made a video saying it's 1356. It's not. It's almost certainly more like 1377. Sorry, 1356. It's almost certainly 1377. People have been looking at India a lot here. I don't want to go into their reasoning because I haven't fully followed it, but that's fine. Oh, why am I double capturing the bottom of my screen? Hang on. There we go. Sorry if that was annoying you. Yeah, so here we go. Believable world. And there are some sub-pillars here. So population. Now, I know people like pops. I like pops. Pops present a incredible UX challenge. I have spent quite a lot of my time recently thinking about UX, user experience, because we abbreviate words weirdly sometimes. But pops present a difficulty. If you have pops, then you have, what's the population of the world? 1377. I'm going to guess and then tell you. 1377 world population. I guess the answer's over there, so I'm not looking. I guess it's 1 billion. Let's see. 1377 world population. 6 billion. I don't think that's right. Hang on, let me look it up. I'm way off. Way off. It looks like it might have been more like 350 million or so. You've got 350 million people to tell the player about. The player cares about their culture, it cares about their religion. How do you communicate that to the player in an interesting way? Victoria 3, in my opinion, catastrophically fails at doing this. Imperator succeeds, but it has less variables and it has pops made up of, an abstracted away number of people. So it's very difficult. It's very difficult to communicate this to the player in a way that means that they meaningfully engage with it. I was telling, hold your horses here, because this is a funny story if you want to make it one. But I was talking to my wife about EU5 at lunch today, and I was talking about the fact that in EU4 you can tell how much unrest there, as just a normal thing to talk to people's wives about. She's not very interested, but she loves me, so she listened. What was I saying? The unrest in a province in EU4 was quite easy to understand. Hello, buddy. Quite easy to understand where it came from. You could see what the causes of that unrest are. You can see what different things were making the province unhappy, and you could see what you could do to fix it. You could see what might change over time, things like that. And those are vital to making you able to make decisions when playing a grand strategy game. You have to understand what the problem is, what's causing it, what you can do to affect it, and you have to be able to see the impact you have on it. The crucial thing about enjoyment for me, and again, I'm just speaking about me, in a grand strategy game comes partly from being able to see the impacts that what you've done has. So there has to be, with Pops, you have this unique challenge, relatively unique challenge, of letting the player see the impacts they have, which is occurring on a granular level of hundreds of millions of different people. That's very difficult. And we'll talk about how well they seem to have succeeded in doing that. And we'll see more about how they succeed. But that, to me, is the challenge that EU5 has up against it. To me, it seems like it's going to be difficult. I reserve judgment on whether they're going to succeed or not, but we'll see. Brief aside, I'll go full camera. Look at this beautiful boy. Hello, Tintin. How's it going, buddy? All right, I'll see you later. All right, back to it. So here immediately they have promising because there are hatched areas, and that means there is a minority present which represents a certain portion of the population. The ability to display more than one culture per province, immediately they've begun to accept that, if we scroll down, this is a very bad, horrible, I hate it way of displaying information. Because this is tabular, this is, displayed in the table. There are good things about it. Don't get me wrong. There are useful ways of displaying tabular data, but there's a reason that hundreds of thousands of people out there are employed turning things that look like this into things that look like this. It's because people will like looking at things like this. Visualizing data is challenging, and it's big business, and it's going to be really interesting to see how well they succeed at doing it. I'll talk more about why I don't like that one in a second, but this looks pretty cool. Okay, so each location has pops, unsurprising. They have 3 things about them, which is interesting. So they have, firstly, a culture. This makes sense. I'm looking forward to see how they handle culture if they go more in depth. In EU4, culture is extremely one-dimensional. It'll be interesting to see how they go into that, if they go more into it. Religion, this will be interesting. This is one of the areas that they really need content, culture and religion, in my opinion. Cultures and religion should feel different. If I play EU4, I so often play in the HRE. And why do I do that? Because if I'm playing outside the HRE, I'm just missing out on the HRE minigame. More regional, cultural, religion-based minigames are great. So I hope that they do a bunch of those. Those, I hasten to add, I'm calling them content. Maybe I should call them mechanics. They're difficult, more difficult to develop in parallel, but They also have social classes: nobles, clergy, burghers, peasants, slaves. Some people are worried. They think this is not enough. That's fine. It seems like a good breakdown for the era to me. So I'm happy about that. This is troubling. I saw this image, and it was part of the reason I decided originally to not make a TInto Talks video, because I don't like being negative. It might surprise you, but I don't. And this seems worrying to me, because if the way that I am supposed to learn about how people are doing in my nation, and again, I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying this is the case. Okay, just to be very clear. If the way I'm supposed to learn about who's happy in my nation is by looking at a list, filtering it with typing, useful to have as an option, but horrible in his general experience, and then looking at all of the different groups who are split up if any of the variables of class, culture, and religion are different, and then hovering and seeing a tooltip here and going, okay, why are you unhappy? Okay, what that would result in is me saying, okay, in Tarragona, there are 2 populations that matter, and I'm only going to care about them. I'm going to hover here, I'm going to hover here. Okay, and the effect that the POP system has had, if that's the case, the actual effect is exclusively making it such that this province might as well be 2 provinces. The province where these people live and the province where these people live. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm sure the clerics and the nobles and the burghers have more impact on unrest than peasants, surely. I mean, if Johann is at all competent, and I think that he is, but let's say that there was just, 2 populations here. if all the pop system achieves is making it such that these people operate as kind of provinces onto their own, that would be bad. And if I have to look at all of these tooltips to understand why there's unrest in this province, that's bad. So I hope there are ways to aggregate this. I hope there are ways to see ways in which, you know, what are the prevailing issues across the country affecting pops from multiple different strata of society. And, okay, I'm glad I remembered this. I'm going to do this. We won! We won! There's no situation menu. Yes! This is not from the TInto talks. He said this a while ago. Johan shares my opinion, and I happen to see this because it's also Lambert's opinion, and Lambert pointed it out to me. Johan shares my opinion that the situation menu as it exists in CK3 and in Victoria 3 is horrible, bad UI design. Amazing. If you want to know why it's bad UI design, I have multiple videos on the topic. Go and watch them. It's bad, no, bad, don't do it, bad. I hasten to clarify that the people that designed it, I'm sure, are very intelligent and probably better at UX design than me, which makes it all the more baffling that it exists, because it's horrible. Ugh. It's good for new users. It's good for new people learning the game. I know, but then after that, it's bad. Anyway. Okay, so there are some other statistics related to pops. Literacy, which is interesting, and current satisfaction, which we're probably seeing on the right here. So there's different things that affect their satisfaction. One of the fascinating things here to me, and maybe it's just an omission, here are the things that he says affects their satisfaction. Their religious tolerance. Makes sense. That's normal. Cultural view of the primary culture. Makes sense. That's normal. That's EU4 talk. The status of their culture. Now that is interesting, how that's different to this. Maybe different cultures can have multiple different degrees of status as well as relations to the primary culture. Very interested to see how that works. General instability. Fine. This is, global. There's a global stability stat, probably. Several things we can't talk about yet, and specially scripted circumstances. Now, in here must lie access to goods, or economic productivity, or employment, or ability to get food, even if it's just food. It must, because otherwise, why have a pop system? This is what Imperial does, and this is why someone who got me thinking, I didn't agree when I first read their comment, but got me thinking, there's not really much point having a pop system if your pops aren't involved in your economic simulation, and there isn't a mutual relationship between them and the economic simulation, and the economic simulation and them. So I'm very, very interested to know what falls within these triangular brackets. We'll see. Indirect values to the impact on the military, economical, and political part of the game go into detail in future. So yeah, we'll see. Now this is good. They can grow and decline over time, assimilate into other cultures, and convert to religions. Now, I think it's very unlikely, I'm putting it out here now, I think it's very unlikely you will have a number of missionaries in EU5. Because it just doesn't make sense in a pop-based situation. And how they handle that is going to be something I have my eye out for. Population is the foundation. It is a system that is in the background. You will have only indirect control over. Good, correct, well done. Nothing more to be said. He then goes to lengths to say that it won't impact the performance. I believe him. He knows better than me. Now here is almost certainly the province of Byzantium in 1377. Or maybe Byzantium isn't a province. We'll see. Might be more specific than that, a location. But here we go. Here's the breakdown. This is a good way of visualizing it. I hope there are... what I want is pie charts that represent what's causing unhappiness in the province. What portion of unhappiness comes from religious intolerance? What portion of unhappiness comes from things like that? That would be really important. I also think that this is an interesting pie chart, and I hope you can see historical numbers on this. UI non-final, by the way. I think a lot of the text in the game looks jank as heck, especially... I hope it gets changed. Even if it doesn't, I'm sure we can mod it. But I really don't like how this text looks. It looks way too modern, way too sleek. I like my maps to look like actual maps, as opposed to this. When I say actual maps, I mean like physical, ye old style maps. So I don't like this, but I'm sure that's moddable. Okay, and that's pretty much it on population. There's obviously a lot of stuff to be said around this. I'm not going to do too much wild speculation, but I think this is pretty cool. Other thing that's worth noting, there are 27,000 unique locations on the map. That's, based on my reckoning, that's like 6 times more than EU4. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. So, some of the comments. I thought this was obvious, but someone's asked, and it's good they asked, because looking back at the text, it wasn't obvious. Pops are handled per location, not per territory. Which makes sense. Getting up above 70% literacy for peasants by the end of the game is going to be really hard. That makes sense. There are not urban locations. Not all locations are urban, rather. People were asking, are the provinces all going to be representing both the countryside around them and the urban center? He's saying no, because not all locations are urban. Serfs are going to technically be peasants rather than slaves. It's a kind of definitional thing. I don't think it hugely matters. Some serfs are definitely properly referred to, if you want to use words in a kind of consistent way, are slaves, but it doesn't, to me, it doesn't really matter. When he says has presence with X and Y, I assume it means that, there's going to be like rights for peasants and things like that. What else? Yes, so this I like. As I said, I like things that look like maps. There are not going to be terrain visible when zoomed in on the political map mode. And he seems to be trying to make both the political and terrain map mode are going to be pretty. And I know a lot of people like the Imperator map mode, where when you zoom in, you can see the countrysides and things. I don't like that personally. I don't prefer it anyway to the kind of beautiful maps that you can get playing like Mayo and Taxes. So I'm happy about this. But you will be happy as well, because he says later on that you'll also have a cool like Imperator style one. Colonial pops, I mean, the original culture assimilate into a new colonial culture. All exciting questions will be followed in the future. It shows the biggest 5 cultures. Makes perfect sense to me. And yeah, here we go. Like Imperator, pretty and functional. Terrain map mode, that's the goal. He confirms that famine, war, and disease will all affect the rate or the number of people that there are, which seems like that will be cool. So we will get big variations of population, which is very, very cool. I like the idea of fostering, like protecting your heartlands from war being a really powerful economic advantage. The UK had a lot of flourishing of its population, unlike some. I'm not a historian, but my understanding is that the UK had a lot of flourishing of its population after it got over its era of having lots of civil wars, because it was never invaded. And so that means they just had time to farm and reproduce, basically, resulting in a huge population increase. The prosperity system in EU4 is the much more abstract version of that. Having it less abstract, very cool. Very cool. It should be an incredibly potent force to have a peaceful home front over hundreds of years. Like, it's a massively impactful thing. Other interesting stuff in here. Slaves don't count for literacy when you're doing research, which in this era I think makes sense. In the ancient era would make less sense, but yeah, we'll see. And yeah, here we go. The striped lines mean a cultural minority that has a certain percentage of the pops in that location. Interesting to see here, they cut out pops types from earlier in development, which will be interesting. And yeah, literacy is not the only factor on tech, which obviously makes all kinds of sense. On to number 4, and this horrible looking map, but don't worry, I'm sure it's just a special map mode designed to make them all very distinct from one another. This is the map that people have, another map that people have used to hone in on the idea that this is 1377, because you can see the boundary between nations on this map, and it looks very much like the Roman Empire controls this area and this area and this area and this area, and then we can see the Empire of Serbia here. Based on the combination of those two factors, people are pretty darn confident. You will be happy to hear, if you are a long-time viewer of the channel, that this map is very similar to the situation in Anatolia and the Balkans at the start of Mayo and Taxes. So it's a setup here that we will be familiar with. You know, I know where Karaman is. I know where. Okay, now I'm forgetting the names, but still, we know Iodin, I think, is this one. But yeah, pretty cool stuff. So let's talk about governments. Now this is a little tantalizing. It doesn't reveal very much. But we can see we have monarchies with legitimacy, republics with republican tradition, etc. This all makes sense to me. It seems very different. It seems very similar to EU4, and there are differences between them. A republic cannot have royal marriages. Step Horde has a different view on how war, peace, and conquest work. That's interesting. That's really interesting. It seems like maybe Step Hordes might be kind of truly migratory states. It should be. I mean, how the heck are they going to do that? Going to be really, really interesting. And this, to me, speaks to the more content on launch. So EU4, for example, launched with hordes being functionally monarchies, and then later on there were DLCs that made them a little bit less functionally monarchies, but compared to what they could be, they're functionally still very similar to just normal states. The fact that they might be going beyond that speaks to the whole more content thing, which is going to be cool. Here's an illustration. It's just from an event or something like that he clarifies in the comments. But now here's how it goes. Each country has a ruler, or might be in regency if there are no possible adult heirs. And they're flavored based on what they are. So the crown of Aragon, the King of Sweden, etc. All cool stuff. So the estates mechanic. Please, Johan, don't make it a push and pull that's even from the start of the game to the end of the game. Please make it so the estates start really powerful, and one of the main governmental goals is strengthening the state. Centralization, all hail glorious centralization, one of the main drivers of human progress. The Leviathan will grow, suck it. And caps. So the estates are active entities and will do things on their own. Keeping the estates satisfied while keeping their powers low is an important part of the gameplay loop. Please don't mean that they start low, like in EU4, and then they're going to grow steadily, unlike in EU4. Please make it so they start high. It would be so good. It would be so good. We'll see. But yeah, full connection between the population and the states seems really good. So here are 2 government reforms. The UI looks bad, but that's okay. It's all very much work in progress. But yes, monthly progress to aristocracy, meaning, I guess, that the aristocracy are gaining power steadily because they are an autocracy, but the crown is more powerful. I'm not going to talk too much about this. Obviously, numbers are non-final, but still. Different government reforms and reform slots will be available based on tag, culture, and religion. Good way to get differentiation around the globe, which I like. I don't so much like it based on tag, but culture and religion is very cool. I like that. I hope you start out with plenty of reforms, and then it's just that they change over time. And I hope that they unlock not just based on time, but based on tech and circumstance in your nation, but we'll see. Then there are laws. So these are the 2 possibilities in the language of the pleading. You can either have the court language or common language. So people speak, common tongue, or everyone speak in lingua franca, and it makes differences. Pretty cool. I hope there's lots of these. I think laws are kind of fun. I hope that the estates fight over this. I hope they have an active role, which seems like it will be interesting. So there's reforms and laws. Seems cool. Takes a few years for stuff to have full effect, depending on admin efficiency. Seems fine. Your government can call parliaments and things, which seems cool. They, the estates will have demands. You can satisfy them. That makes sense. I hope there's a pop-up that reminds you when the thing is due, but we'll see. We'll see. So then you have a cabinet, which grows as you become more advanced. It's allowing you to do more things. Seems cool. A hybrid between EU4's advisors and CK2's council actions. It changing over the course of the game. Love it. More reasons to get more people to do world conquest because they're more engaged to play longer. I'm fine with it. So then there are societal values, and there's going to be 13 societal values. And the examples are from EU2 and 3, centralization, autocracy, serfdom, innovative mercantilism, offensive land inequality, things like that. So you can do various things which shifts you around in how these go. That seems like a really interesting mechanic, adds a load of replayability, loads of ways to make your country really unique. Hopefully they don't make it so that one side of these is just obviously better in all cases, like with the HRE reform paths, for example. That would be really cool. That's pretty much it on the actual TInto talks. There are some more comments. This is an exciting one. The UI is 100% scalable. I hope that's true. I hope, for example, this asset doesn't get blown up and look rubbish if you scale the UI to 150%, because I'm sure that this bit of the UI is scalable and you can just drag this out and make that line bigger. Please don't make this picture bigger because you ain't got the tech to scale this one, buddy. That is not an SVG file. So I hope it actually is really scalable and works well. We will see. Let me find the other one. Yeah, possible background for a menu is the asset there. So how customizable are government types? Very much And the example was, can we set term limits on Republican rulers? Interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. The idea that you don't just have different governments that are different, but you can actually customize them. Fun. I like that. There are such things as interregnums as opposed to merely regencies. Interesting. Very curious to see how those work. Cool. Yeah, UI changed lots of times. It's all basically has no artwork, all under the development. Totally fine. There's currently a 2-year cooldown, and as long as it's been less than 5 years, it doesn't matter. I really hope there is a pop-up for this. Let me see. There's no tiers in the reforms and laws, which is good. I like that. Everything being available makes a lot of sense. A few weeks until an economic overview is exciting. That's sooner than I expected. There is no term like core province. It's something entirely different. I hope it is not Imperator, where there is no concept of a core province. And claims aren't even per province, which is annoying. So if you claim a country and someone else has taken part of it, it's really annoying. Anyway, in Imperator, it's all just based on culture and religion, basically. When you take a new province, I hope there is something still about to represent kind of integrating it into your administration. That will be interesting to see. This was just a funny comment. The seat system for EU parliaments was shit. It did not age well. True facts coming out of that. Let me see. Yes, so this is another big one. There are no EU4 types of mission trees. There will be another style of mission trees. I hope if it's Imperator style, you can preview the contents of trees. Otherwise, I think this is interesting. Mission trees to me are, the EU4 style anyway, are bad and limiting, and I didn't like them when they were introduced. And I was working for Paradox, not at Paradox technically, contractor, etc., but I was working with Paradox at the time when they were announced, and I was not happy about it, because basically if you put a mission tree in England, Germany, and France, then that means that no one plays Italy. And they say, oh, Italy's lacking content. They're not lacking content. They're the same amount of content they had last week. It's just that you've introduced something that's necessarily nation-bound. So I hope the mission trees are religion, cultural, geographical specific. I want to be able to have them dynamic over time. I want them to have them not tied to tags necessarily. There can be also tag-specific ones, but make it so they're dynamic. That would be really, really cool. Was there anything else I wanted to add here? I think there might have been. There we go. So no mana. Johan has previously clarified what he thinks mana is. He thinks that monarch points in EU4 are mana. He thinks that manpower in EU4 is not mana. He thinks that money is not mana. He thinks that piety in CK2 and 3 is not mana. So that's an interesting clarification on what he means by mana. I happen to agree with him. I think there's a good delineation. Because when people say mana, they mean kind of inappropriately abstracted and nonsensical. So no mana. Promising. They change over what choices you make in many different parts of the game for societal value. So it's not just like what idea groups you take or something, if there are idea groups, but that will be interesting. Not Victoria 3 War. And yes, that's it. I'm going to make a bunch of suggestions now, I think, on this thread. Do go and do that yourself if you have cool ideas. I hope you enjoyed this rundown. It's been fun to do. I'll probably do it again in a month or so. In fact, yeah, here you go. Let me do this. Remind me in a month to review the new TInto talks. Cool. Seems good. I will do that in a month. Awesome. Much appreciate your attention. Tell me what your thoughts are. I'm curious. And, oh, hello. He's back. Want this, buddy? There you go. Good boy. You can come back. I want to make a final appearance. Did you bang your head on the desk? Ugh. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.